हरे कृष्णा। जगत गुरु श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णवों की जय। Today we are going to study the verse number 18 of chapter number 6 of Bhagwat Gita as it is. The name of this chapter is Dhyan Yoga. In today's verse, we will get to know that what is the perfection of Dhyan Yoga. Up till now, we have come to know about various rules and regulations that a yogi needs to strictly observe and follow to be able to reach to the stage of perfection. This verse is very important for both Dhyan Yogi and Bhakti Yoga. I am sure that by now all of us know the real meaning of yoga. Yoga is not just some physical postures and breathing exercises to keep the body healthy and fit. Rather, the real meaning of yoga is to connect with the Supreme Lord. For this purpose, the various process is recommended in the scriptures, and these ways are Karma Yoga, Gyan Yoga, Dhyan Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. These different ways are prescribed in the scriptures so that people can opt either of them and attain the perfection of life. In today's verse, we will get to know the highest perfection of Dhyan Yoga. Now let us recite the verse number 18. Yada vinayatam chittam atmani ev avatisthate nispriha सर्वकामेभ्यो युक्त इत्य उच्यते तदा यदा विनियतं चित्तम् आत्मनि एव अवतिष्ठते निःस्पृहः सर्वकामेभ्यो युक्त इत्य उच्यते तदा यदा विनियतं चित्तम् आत्मनि एव अवतिष्ठते निःस्पृहः सर्वकामेभ्यो युक्त इत्य उच्यते तदा. Today's verse is the answer to all the people who may have the question that when the yoga is complete or when a yogi attains the stage of perfection. This is why today's verse begins with Yada. Yada means when. Yada viniyatam chittam atmani ev avatisthate. Krishna says that when the yogi, by the practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, atmani ev avatisthate. And then further Krishna says, he becomes nispriha sarvakamebhyo, which means devoid of all material desires. And then he is called yukta itti uchyate tada. Tada means then. Then he is said to have attained the highest perfection of yoga. Now let us start reading the Anvay given by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur ki jai. Yada, when, viniyatam is fully controlled, chittam, the mind, atmani, in the soul, ev, certainly, avasthite, and stays steadily, nispriha, free from cravings, sarvakamebhyo, for all sense enjoyment, yukta iti, thus connected in yoga, uchyate, he is said, tada, then. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, when the mind becomes completely controlled and firmly fixed on the self alone, free from the craving for all sense enjoyment, at that time one is said to be connected in yoga. So it's an answer to all of us that if we think that a Dhyan yogi who does so much of rules and regulations. He practices such strict rules and regulations. When is he going to attain the completion, the perfection of yoga? So, in reply to it, Krishna in this verse, he begins with Yada. Yada means when. Krishna says, a person has attained perfection in yoga only when he can situate the controlled mind unwaveringly in the self. Self is Atma. In simple words, we can say that when the mind is completely controlled and firmly fixed on the self alone, and it is free from the cravings of all the sense enjoyment, at that time one is said to be connected in yoga. So the question was this, that when is one's yoga complete? So a person's yoga is complete only when the mind becomes completely controlled and fixed on the self alone, which does not have any cravings for any sense enjoyment of this material world. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that the yogi is said to have attained perfection in yoga when during his yoga practice his heart becomes steady, stable, free from desires for sense enjoyment, and is situated within his self alone. Then the yogi is said to have attained perfection in yoga. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur ki Jai. Now we will read the purport given by Srila Prabhupada. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Anant Koti Vaishnavon ki Jai. Prabhupada in his purport, he says that the activities of the yogi are distinguished from those of an ordinary person by his characteristic cessation from all kinds of material desires. And amongst the material desires, sex is the chief. Srila Prabhupada is making us understand the difference between the activities of a yogi and an ordinary person. Prabhupada says that a perfect yogi is so well disciplined in the activities of the mind that he can go no longer be disturbed by any kind of material desires. Prabhupada says that a perfect yogi is so well disciplined in his mind, in all his mental activities, that he can no longer be disturbed by any kinds of material desires. This perfectional stage can automatically be attained by persons in Krishna consciousness. Again, a comparison is given between a Dhyan yogi and a Bhakti yogi. A Bhakti yogi means a person in Krishna consciousness. So a Dhyan yogi, he attains this position after a long yoga practice of Ashtanga Yoga, in which Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dharana, Dhyan, and then Samadhi. And this stage, this perfectional stage, automatically is attained by a Krishna conscious person. Prabhupada states a shloka from Srimad Bhagavatam to give us the example of a Krishna conscious person's daily routine. Save manah Krishna pada ravindayo. King Amrish first of all engaged his mind to the lotus feet of Krishna. Vachansi Vaikunt Gunanuvarnane. And then he engaged his words in describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord. Karau Harer Mandir Marjanadishu. He engaged his hands in cleaning the temple of the Lord. Shrutim Chakar Achyut Satkathodaye. His ears engaged in hearing the activities of the Lord. Mukund lingalay darshane drisho. His eyes engaged in seeing the transcendental forms of the Lord. Tad bhritya gatra ange sparshe sangamam. His body engaged in touching the bodies of the devotee, in serving the devotees. Ghranam cha tatpad saroj saurabhe. His sense of smell engaged in smelling the divine scent of the lotus flower which is offered to the Lord. Shrimat tulasya rasanam tad arpite. His tongue engaged in tasting the tulasi leaves offered at the lotus feet of the Lord. Padau harer kshetra padanusarpane. His legs engaged in going to the places of pilgrimage and the temple of the Lord. Shiro Rishikesh Pad Abhivandane. His head engaged in offering respectful obeisances unto the Lord. Kamam Chadasya Natu Kama Kamyaya. And his desires, all desires, engaged in executing the mission of the Lord. Yathottamam Shlok Janashriya Ratihe. All these transcendental activities are quite befitting a pure devotee. This is the daily engagement of King Ambarish, who is a pure devotee of the Lord. This is the routine of a Krishna conscious. After explaining to us the daily routine of a Krishna conscious person, how he leads his life in transcendental activities, Prabhupada says that this transcendental stage is quite difficult to be followed by the followers of the impersonalist path, but it is very easy and practical for a person in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada gives us the reason that why this path cannot be followed by the impersonalist, because they think the Lord to be impersonal. They think the Lord to be formless. That is why they don't engage their mind and body, senses, to serve the Lord. And on the other hand, a Krishna conscious person engages his mind and senses in serving the Lord lovingly, and it is known as transcendental activities. Further, Srila Prabhupada says that unless the mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord by constant remembrance, such transcendental engagement, that is, serving the Lord, is not practical at all. So it means that fixing the mind at the lotus feet of the Lord is very much needed. Prabhupada says that the senses and the mind, they require engagement. Simply stopping the senses and the mind does not work. Mind and senses have to be engaged, and it has to be engaged at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada further says that for the people who are general people, who have not reached to the renounced order of life, for them the transcendental engagement of the senses and mind is prescribed in the scriptures, and it is the perfect process for transcendental achievement. And this is called Yukt in Bhagwat Gita. Yukt means to be connected. If one wants to control the mind and senses, the best way is to engage at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. In today's verse, Srila Prabhupada has explained to us that who is a perfect yogi. Prabhupada says that a perfect yogi is that person who is devoid of all kinds of material desires, and his mind is disciplined and is perfectly fixed on the spiritual progress of the soul. This stage of perfection is attained by a Dhyan yogi after observing much austerities and sacrifices. A Dhyan yogi leaves his home and goes to a forest all alone and meditates on the Vishnu form Paramatma. He has to observe strict celibacy and needs to be completely fearless. This is how, when a Dhyan yogi practices the process of Ashtang Yoga to discipline his mind, then he attains the perfection of yoga. But for a Bhakti yogi, he attains this stage of perfection with much ease and just by following the footsteps of Ambarish Maharaj. Now we will see the daily routine of a devotee. A Krishna conscious person first of all surrenders his mind at the lotus feet of Krishna, and then one after the other he engages all his senses in the service of the Lord. He glorifies Krishna and his various incarnations by the power of his speech. He engages his hands in cleaning the temple of the Lord. He engages his eyes in taking the divine darshan of the beautiful transcendental form of the Lord. He engages his body in serving the Lord and his devotees. He engages his tongue in tasting the tulsi leaves and bhog which is offered to Krishna. He engages his legs to go to the temples and to the places of pilgrimage where the Lord has performed his transcendental pastimes. He offers his head for paying dandavat obeisances to the Lord. This way, a devotee's mind and all the senses are full time engaged in the loving service of the Lord. I am sure that now, after knowing the process of Ashtang Yoga and the daily routine of a devotee, we have properly understood which path is easy to attain the perfection of yoga. Srila Prabhupada explains to us that each path of yoga has its stage of perfection, and the practitioner must know it, and then only he reaches to the level of perfection. The target of Gyan Yoga is to merge with the divine effulgence and become one with the divine Lord's Brahma Jyoti. The target of Dhyan Yogi is to be able to see the Supreme Lord who resides in the heart in four-handed Vishnu form, and to be able to reach to this stage of perfection, the Dhyan Yogi has to be completely devoid of all the material desires, with his mind firmly fixed on the spirit soul. And to attain this, the process of Ashtang Yoga is recommended, in which a strict process of Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dhyan, Dharana, and finally Samadhi. Samadhi is the stage of perfection, and a yogi reaches to this position only when he is a true sannyasi, a true brahmachari, and when his mind is completely devoid of all the material desires. And even after attaining the highest stage of perfection in Dhyan Yoga and Gyan Yoga, there is always a great risk of fall down. We have the example of Ajamil and Rishi Vishwamitra. Ajamil was a Brahmin. He had full knowledge of the scriptures and had led a very pious and clean life. But all this knowledge could not help him to control his senses. The moment he saw a Shudra woman embracing a man in the forest, Ajamil lost all his control. threw away his pious wife and married the Shudra woman and begot 10 children from her. This way, a pious, learned man had a fall down. Same was the case with Rishi Vishwamitra, who lost all his control on his senses the moment he heard the anklet bells of Menaka. 60,000 years of Dhyan Yoga could not save the great sage, and he fell from his exalted, elevated position in Dhyan Yoga. These examples are from Bhagavatam to caution us. A Dhyan yogi or a Gyan yogi may fall from their elevated position, but this never happens with a Bhakti yogi. And the only reason behind it is this, that a Bhakti yogi holds the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord very firmly. Haridas Thakur was approached by a prostitute at the dead of night for 3 nights consecutively. But it did not disturb the mind of Haridas Thakur at all. Rather, on the 4th day, the prostitute fell at the feet of Haridas Thakur and apologized to him. She herself got transformed into a true devotee and left all the impious things which she was doing till then. This is the power and protection of the holy name of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada says that artificially no one can control his senses. The best way is to employ all the senses in the loving service of the Lord. This way, the senses are not starved, yet they are in control. Our senses are called Rishik, and Krishna is Rishikesh. When our senses are engaged to serve Krishna, to make Krishna happy, then we also become happy and pleased naturally. Just the same way, when the root is watered, the entire tree becomes happy and healthy. Srila Prabhupada says that this is why a Bhakti yogi is always situated in the transcendental position, devoid of all material desires, and this is true yoga according to Bhagwat Gita. And according to Bhagwat Gita means according to Krishna, and Krishna means the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now in the next verse, Krishna is going to tell us about the yogi who stays unwavered on the stage of perfection. For us, the instruction is this, that we must follow the footsteps of great devotees like Ambarish Maharaj and Haridas Thakur. These are the practical tips given to us by Krishna, and once we practice it, then we will surely experience the change in us. This is how the mind and senses can be completely controlled, and we must do it because it can be only done in human life. I thank Srila Prabhupada. I thank Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and I thank my Shiksha Guru, His Grace Harimohan Das Prabhuji. By their help, by their mercy, we are being able to understand the most secretive knowledge of Bhagwat Gita in such simple manner. I thank you for taking out your most valuable time and listening to Krishna so attentively. Please do write in the comment box what you have learned in this particular verse, and do share the video as much as possible, because this is the only way that we can do good to the entire mankind. We will meet the next week with the next verse. Till then, keep chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and be happy. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. The name of the Lord and the pastimes of the Lord and the Lord is non-different from each other. So when we chant Hare Krishna, we actually have Krishna dancing on our tongue. And this is the only way prescribed in our scriptures for Kali Yuga to end the endless cycle of birth and death. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Anant Koti Vaishnavon ki jai. Hare Krishna.